I'm looking around to see if there are any more candles that need to be lit. I think we're covered for a while. So last Sunday, I began our December series of drawing upon the various sources of our living tradition as Unitarian Universalists as we reflect on the various holiday traditions that occur during this month. I reflected upon the natural and fundamental experience of awe and practicing aerobics. We connected with the Unitarian Universalist source that we articulate as direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. On Monday of last week, I had the wondrous opportunity to meet with some of our members at the continuing care community at Marist Grove during their monthly Soul Matters group. And since the theme of their discussion was the gift of mystery, meeting with them was like an extended conversation on the sermon topic of awe. In the conversations, group members offered their own reflections and direct experiences of awe and mystery. Nancy, I'm remembering that one person told me to give her a special wave because she was going to get on to YouTube, our YouTube channel today, and watch the service. So excuse me for a moment. That's our secret message to one another. And I actually invited every one of you last Sunday to take time during this past week to remember our own experiences of awe, perhaps using the definition that came from the scientific research of Keltner, the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. These experiences, as you know, can occur in the most mundane or the most sublime of circumstances. These experiences can be so ordinary as to miss detection, or can, even in their momentariness, linger for a lifetime. There is a phenomenon that I've noticed among the sophisticated and the savvy, present company included, where we can sometimes repress the sublime. We might be tempted to think that regarding the sublime, awe, or the transcendent within life, we're above all of that, right? After all, we're so realistic, we're so pragmatic, so practical. We are so concerned about making a difference in this world right now that we don't want to trouble our little minds with such lofty aspirations or experiences such as awe. I remind you that in Keltner's research, that one of the most common experiences of awe arose when people experienced other human beings doing extraordinary things, doing acts of kindness and courage in the face of adversity. Some of our own heroes in social justice were fueled just as much by a direct experience of the transcendent as they were by their own passion for justice. They're not necessarily separate categories. They may be very much interrelated. It behooves us to recognize how our own assumed savviness and sophistication about transcendent experiences may not serve to give us the strength that we actually need to sustain ourselves beyond the first disappointment in our work toward social justice. We repress the sublime at our own peril. The psychologist Abraham Maslow was one who ventured to study these actual experiences and impulses within us with the same discipline and intention that previous people in his field focused on the repression of instincts and more basic desires. Maslow, in his study called The Higher Reaches of Human Nature, recognized what he called a Jonah complex. I know I have a lot of biblical scholars in the room, but let me just help you recall that the biblical character Jonah was asked to take on a mission to Nineveh that he'd rather not take on. He doesn't feel like he's up to accomplishing such great things, so he attempts to flee. Even while attempting to escape the higher calling, as the story goes, a fish swallows him up. And after 3 days, he's deposited on the shores of Nineveh, despite himself. No matter what you think about this particular fish story, I think that Maslow has something to offer us in his analysis. Maslow claims that we fear our highest possibilities as well as our lowest ones. We are generally afraid to become that which we can glimpse in our most perfect moments, under the most perfect conditions, under conditions of greatest courage. We enjoy and even thrill to the godlike possibilities we see in ourselves in such peak moments, and yet, we simultaneously shiver with weakness, awe, and fear before these same possibilities. Not only are we ambivalent about our highest possibilities, we are also in a perpetual and I think universal, perhaps even necessary conflict, he writes, and ambivalence over these same highest possibilities in other people and human nature in general. One of the persons in that group at Marist Grove shared last week her own experience of a time years ago when she shared for her what was a direct experience of awe with a group of Unitarians, as she says, and how she felt dismissed or shut down at that time. You can imagine it sometimes as well, and my heart breaks when I hear or observe such experiences among us. I understand where it comes from, especially among those of us who may have escaped the grips of a previous religious affiliation that in retrospect you may have felt compromised your intellect, your integrity, or your authenticity, or your hard-nosed approach to reality. But when we succumb as well to the repression of the sublime, we are not only limiting ourselves, but we're also limiting our understanding of humanity. Does that make sense to you? Yes. Encourage me a little bit. Yes. All right. There is a reason that our tradition includes this source of direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder. It is true to our religious history and our heritage as Unitarian Universalists. It's true to many cultures and religious traditions, and it's true to many of our own individual experiences. I personally feel that our repression of the sublime supremely limits our capacity to encounter and directly engage with the real, astounding challenges that we face in our time. We may succumb to skepticism instead. If you have a poor diet that includes chewing on some of the recent opinion pieces in the news, you could easily be feeling a touch of inevitability and fatalism today. You know what I'm talking about? Some of us want to imagine that a candidate that says he will be a dictator for a day is a joke, done only for attention seeking. Others of us may feel this candidate is dead serious. We may succumb in the face of that kind of conversation. We may succumb to cynicism. What matters is that we stay alert. What did I say matters? Alert. Okay, good. To stay alert to the dynamic that underlies us all, and that dynamic is this tendency to create chaos. We need to recognize that this chaos that is being perpetuated is actually a tactic. As Reverend Otis Moss III writes, chaos breeds cynicism and despair. It pushes us towards withdrawal and inaction. And for this reason, those who perpetuate injustice use chaos as their weapon. Their only remaining tactic for advancing their agenda of injustice is to enforce silence. They conjure the demon chaos, trying to use its power to provoke the other side to despair and to give up their struggle. We need to stay alert to the narratives of cynicism, fatalism, and inevitability and despair that can easily become viral if we're not alert to this tactic. In times of despair, we may be tempted to call it in rather than to call forth all the hope, courage, resistance, and resilience that we can in the upcoming months. When it seems to us that it is all inevitable, rather than kick back, we need to do some high kicks. This is the moment where I would have demonstrated, but I'm going to demonstrate my ability to stay very serious. But this is where Hanukkah comes in. For the story invites us to consider that even in the most despairing of times, even when we feel we are not enough, even when the darkness is threatening to overcome us, we might discover that there is just enough hope for us to kindle among ourselves, to get us through and to help us move toward our highest possibilities and the highest possibilities of our society and our humanity. Even at this time, we can discover that we can extend what little hope we have in order to illumine the path before us. It may seem like a naive message, given the times that we are in, especially since the current situation can feel to some so hopeless, so devoid of light or promise. And as I ponder this story of Hanukkah this year, I'm finding myself asking some different questions. The story reminds me that before there was the seemingly miraculous unfolding of the light beyond what was expected, that first there was darkness. That long before there was even an inclination to take the step to rededicate the temple with what little oil was available, there was oppression, there was misery, there was despair. Dark and light are not inseparable. Rabbi Lawrence Hoffman, in the book The Journey Home, Discovering Deep Spiritual Wisdom of the Jewish Tradition, explores the relationship between dark and light, up and down, and he writes, whether purely arbitrary or rooted in human evolution, human experience at its most promising presupposes standing tall, enjoying the clarity that comes from being bathed in light and surveying the pattern all around us. On a clear day, we say, you can see forever. And when we do, we feel up or on a high. And he continues, by contrast, when we're depressed, we feel low, unable to rise to the occasion and to see beyond the present moment. He continues, Robert Frost writes chillingly, I have been one acquainted with the night. Night is also Elie Wiesel's haunting title for his Chronicle of Auschwitz. Night, then, is both darkness and down. It is what we fear most. But I think there are ways for us to break beyond and move beyond that particular cultural narrative about darkness and to appreciate and to understand the interplay of light and dark. We all have our own relationships with dark or darkness. Much of it we've imbibed from this particular culture in the way that Rabbi Hoffman describes. If we did a personal archaeology of our relationship to darkness, darkness may represent any number of things to us, not just one thing. Darkness may, for some of us, represent emotions and associations as fear, as Hoffman says, as the unknown, as where monsters dwell, and unsafe, or as negative for a number of reasons. Darkness is often considered something to be avoided rather than to be embraced. And today, I want to encourage us to recognize that narrative and to recognize how darkness and light can both be embraced together in their interrelationship with one another. I've come to accept that our spirituality emerges within our personal lives in a process that is more complex than an on and off, dark and light kind of phenomena. In fact, we are often at any point in time in some dance between light and dark. The popular writer and theologian Barbara Brown Taylor makes a useful distinction between what she calls a solar spirituality and a lunar spirituality. In her full solar spirituality, she states, I have to bring my happiest face to my neighbor, to church, and expect only good things will happen. These expectations to be always hopeful, never complaining, always sunny, and to put a silver lining on every difficulty, she says, wore me out. She asks, what if the moon is a better image for the spiritual life than the sun? It's different every night. It's a better match for the interior life compared to the big golden disk that looks the same every day. We do go through different phases in our personal and spiritual life. It's not all, as the line in a song goes, a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Perhaps we can make room this Hanukkah and this holiday season for embracing the dark and the light together. From Barbara Brown Taylor's lunar spirituality perspective, we can each ask ourselves during this time, which moon phase speaks to us at any particular moment? Does it seem that you're experiencing the darkness of a new moon, that light is scarce and there are only specks of light shining in your darkness? Does it seem that you're in the moment of the waxing of the moon, a crescent phase when something is emerging and some opportunities for growth or change are coming into view? Does it seem like you are in a full moon phase when light is abundant? What in your world is beginning to shimmer quietly with possibility? Or does it seem that you are in a waning moon phase when the moon is returning to the sun and darkness is growing? It could feel like a kind of restlessness, a time of unknowing. Which phase of the moon speaks more directly to your life right now? How might this lunar view allow you to see your life more fully, rather than as an on or off, up or down, dark or light kind of view that's so limiting to our real experience? In what ways may the dark be an opportunity for new insight, new knowledge, and new growth? I would suggest a practice for you to go out and look at the moon now and then and ask, whatever is happening in that phase of the moon right now, reflect whether it's full or waxing or waning or new. Ask, what is full in my own life? What is waxing or waning in my own life? What is new in my own life? How does the moon reflect in my life these aspects of full, waxing, waning, and new? So rather than avoid the darkness through retreat, withdrawal, cynicism, or despair, I think we can come to recognize that darkness can have a purpose where work is actually done, where new insights can occur to us, where courage can be incubated and then drawn upon in ways beyond our imagination. Indeed, we can even dance in the darkness. And this reminder is embedded, I feel, in the Hanukkah story. The story reminds us that the light didn't arrive all at once. It arose in phases, and it arose from darkness. The story reminds us that what is required is stepping up again and again against all odds to light the candles in the modern-day menorah and to utilize what light is available to us in that moment. Hanukkah reminds us that the light didn't arrive all at once, and instead it required stepping up again and again against all odds. The story reminds us to find ways to rededicate ourselves to what matters in spite of the circumstances, no matter how much energy or light is available to us. After all, long before the acts of embracing both dark and light, available light, rededication is first of all an inner experience. Even when their temple remained in ruins, the people gathered to determine how they might rededicate the temple. In the rubble, they found a tiny drop of oil, and not knowing if this tiny drop of oil would be enough, not knowing if their actions could make any noticeable difference, the people lit the oil, and it burned brighter and longer than anyone thought possible. So Hanukkah reminds us that we need to participate. We need to participate in our own rededication to what really matters to us, what really matters to our society and to our cultures at this time. So take a moment right now to think about your own rededication. What do any one of us feel we need to rededicate ourselves to right now? Let's take a moment to think about that. What rededication do you want to make right now? Imagine each of ourselves in the room is rededicating ourselves to something that matters to us, to our world. What is that rededication that you would make? If you need a starter sentence, it's I rededicate myself to. Think about what you might complete that sentence with. Have you thought of something? Anyone? Okay. The fight. Anyone else? The fight for democracy. I did put you on the spot, but you have a whole week to hand your assignment in. So I'll be curious to hear what you come up with. It's important to ask ourselves the question now and then. Years ago, there was a popular bumper sticker. You might remember it. It said, well, it didn't quite say this, but this is the way I could say it here. Stuff happens. You know what that you remember that? Who remembers that? Okay, yeah. So many ways to understand that message. I attended a training in Boston at that time that was called the Public Conversations Project, and we were learning tools and processes on how to have difficult conversations across differences. This was in the 1990s, the halcyon days of having difficult conversations. It's gotten a little harder these days, given our current polarized and divided atmosphere. On the first day of that training, the facilitators handed us a button that we could choose to wear that could capture some of the hope that they wanted to instill in us at the beginning of the training. A training in which we could anticipate there would be some rough patches, some tensions, some conflicts, some difficult conversations. After all, we had been warned by the title. The button simply said, "Shifts happen." I had to really enunciate carefully. I practiced that many times. Say it after me, shifts happen. That's the message I'd like to embrace and underline this Hanukkah. Sure, the message on the original bumper sticker still applies, and yet I want to insert this message in our hearts, in our souls, in our activities at this moment in time and history. Shifts do happen. Amen.